This episode contains explicit content, including profanity and depictions of violence and murder. Listener discretion is advised.
Good evening and welcome back to Friday Night Fiction and part 4 of our story, Dead Cold Drop. Now, let's return to the story and see how a city terrorized by murder might collide with our mild-mannered plumber turned gunslinger, Mr. Doug Rolfstad. Chapter 17. At State Street and East Divide, Doug swung the little utility truck into the Quickie Mart and pulled up to the payphones near the store entrance. The cold sky was blue and clear now, the sun sharp and clean. As he slid the quarter into the slot, his breath showed faintly in the crisp air. He punched in the Valley City number, and while the phone rang, he surveyed the area. His eyes scanned across the icy parking lot, past the rows of gas pumps, and on towards the silhouette of the state capitol building a few hundred yards away. When Mandy got on the line, she sounded upbeat. "Hello?" "Guess who lives at 931 North 17th, Doug said. "A judge named Bennett. Place is practically a mansion." While waiting for Mandy to say something, Doug stood holding the receiver to his ear, watching the activity at the gas station. 2 men walked out of the convenience store. Doug recognized them from the lake. One carried a case of beer and the other a plastic bag, likely snacks for an afternoon of ice fishing. "Judge Bennett?" Mandy said finally. "Seriously?" "Yeah. Hey, why does that name ring a bell?" "Come on, Dad, Jesus." Doug braced himself. Mandy hated when Doug forgot things. To her, it meant he didn't care. To him, it just meant he was getting old. And that was the truth. He was. Everything seemed to be giving out. Knees, hip, shoulder, his bladder, and his memory. "You seriously don't remember me talking about him?" she said. "He's the judge that ruled against Johnny when he sued the city." It was coming back to him now, the sequence of events leading up to Mandy's latest round of unemployment. According to Mandy, her now former boss, Johnny Oderman, had been dealt a series of odd setbacks that forced Johnny's Liquors to close. First came a surreal sequence of zoning changes and disputes, and then the abrupt revocation of his liquor license. Johnny publicly claimed there was a conspiracy against him, greedy competitors and corrupt officials driving him out. He contacted the press and even tried taking legal action, but walked away with nothing. Yeah, I remember, Doug said. "Listen, I got a couple of other names to run by you. Sean Williams and a city councilman named Remick." "Remick," Mandy said, correcting him. "He's the one Johnny thinks was behind all the rezoning and crap, and Williams owns like 5 liquor stores. He's a real asshole." Doug felt a pang of guilt and a smidgen of shame now because, deep down, he had never truly believed the conspiracy theory, even though he'd always listened patiently to Mandy's rants. At the time, he secretly assumed Johnny must have slipped up somewhere, maybe missed a filing deadline, or botched some city paperwork. In the Rolfstad family, Doreen and Mandy were the ones who often distrusted authority. Doug had always assumed folks thought like he did. You walk a straight line, you do an honest week's work, then you go fishing. Sure, there might be some bad cops and politicians, and maybe even a judge out there somewhere, but they were just bad seeds far, far away. Nothing like that happened around here in Bismarck, North Dakota. A flash of a memory hit him. Years ago, a long discussion with Doreen, how she'd reached over and kissed him. "You big, gullible softy," she'd said. "If only the world was really as good as you see it. It would be a lot better place, that's for sure." Doug shifted his weight and switched the receiver to his other hand. The fishermen were pulling out of the lot, surely headed off towards a wonderful day on the ice, a day without any worries about drug deals or murder or a rusted-out Ford Taurus. "Why are you asking about Remick?" Mandy said. Doug took a deep inhale and then laid it all out for Mandy. How he'd run into the reporters about Handshake Row and the three neighbors, Remick, Williams, and the judge. "And here's the kicker," he said. "They all live within direct eyesight of the spot Alex Schatz was killed." Chapter 18. They talked it through together. Mandy sitting in her friend's home in Valley City and Doug standing in the cold at the payphone as customers came and went at Quickie Mart. "Dad, this is some messed up shit. I mean, seriously, it feels like, I don't know, who can we even trust anymore? What time are you meeting the lawyer tomorrow?" They made some adjustments to their plan. Doug would go the next day to the law offices of Peterson and Green alone as scheduled at 4 p.m. He would bring the money with him in case the attorney advised they come forward immediately to Bismarck PD. Mandy would wait by the phone in Valley City while Doug got a read on the situation. He would make sure attorney-client privilege applied before telling the lawyer anything. Once he felt comfortable that they would be fully protected, he and the lawyer would likely call Mandy from the law office and the three of them could discuss everything on a conference call. Then they would take it from there, a little depending on what the lawyer advised. "So that's the plan then, right?" Mandy said. "Yeah, that's the plan." "Okay, so do you promise you'll stick to it this time? No more going off script? We don't want to find you hanging from a picnic shelter." "I promise. No going off script." Then, after a moment, Mandy spoke again. "But hey, I bet the cops are going to ask why it took us so long to come forward with the money. They're going to try to turn this around on me. I just know it." There was something about this innocent statement that triggered Doug Rolfstad. He found himself angry again. No, not at Mandy, but at the whole situation, at the world somehow. Because now he understood things so much more clearly. Doreen had been right. He was gullible and foolishly naive. Clearly people were cutting corners, even judges. And Mandy was probably right too. The cops would ask why it took them so long to come forward. That nagging sense, the one that had been simmering ever since Doreen died, that no matter how hard he tried to do everything right, he still managed to wind up on the losing ends of things. It had all finally boiled over and consumed him. Never before in his life had he dreamed of cutting corners or cheating a system. Never would he have considered keeping $50,000 that wasn't his. "Honestly, Mandy," he said, his irritation crackling across the phone, "at this point they should be happy we come forward at all." "Yeah," Mandy said. "It's just whoever killed that Alex kid is still running around. I just wish they'd catch him. I mean, you don't think it's one of those guys, Remick or Williams or the judge. Guys like that get other people to do their dirty work, don't you think?" "Yeah," Doug said, as he stared at a Ford Taurus with rusty wheel wells idling at the corner, waiting for the light to change. He patted the pistol in his pocket. "Dad, I just got an idea. What do you think of this?" The light at the corner changed, and the Taurus pulled through the intersection and drove off as Mandy laid it all out for him. It was a good idea, he thought. She'd been thinking about Doug's friend Mike Berger at BCI again. As much as Doug trusted him, she still didn't think they should tell him anything at all about the money. That was something better shared with the lawyer. "But Dad," she said, "why don't you see what he might be able to tell us? About the investigation, I mean. When's the last time you two went fishing? Because maybe you should do that, like soon." Doug hadn't eaten since devouring the McDonald's food, so before leaving the Quickie Mart, he ducked into the convenience store. He browsed the aisles, grabbing a little of anything, chips, nuts, a package of hot dogs from the fridge. At the register, he dropped it all on the counter, then grabbed the Saturday edition of the Herald. From a Valentine's display, he grabbed a heart-shaped box of chocolates. On his way home, he did another drive-by, past Mandy's house, the street, and the back alley. Everything still looked normal. Chapter 19. Back home in North Bismarck, Doug dropped the pistol, the newspaper, and the Valentine's chocolate on the couch, then went to the kitchen, where he threw 4 hot dogs in the skillet and pulled some buns from the freezer. He grabbed the phone on the wall and called Mike Berger. "I'm planning on hitting the ice tomorrow morning," he said. "Thought you might want to join me." There was a pause, and then Mike said, "Well, dang, Rolfstad, that's pretty good timing. Nan's in Denver with the grandkids. Let's do it." Doug prepared his hot dog meal, grabbed a cold soda, then settled into the recliner with the newspaper. The day's headlines read, "Police seeking persons of interest," and "Lingering fear grips city as police warn public to stay vigilant following grisly slaying of local newspaper carrier." Doug read the article 3 times. Bismarck PD were being very tight-lipped about the investigation, but said they may have made some progress. They had identified persons of interest and were in the process of trying to locate them. Doug managed 2 hot dogs and a few chips before pushing the plate aside and standing up. He fetched a framed photo of Doreen from the mantel and settled onto the couch this time, her old spot. He opened the heart-shaped box and studied the legend under the lid. Hazelnut praline, raspberry cream, dark chocolate truffle. He scanned along until he found what he was after, Doreen's old favorite. He plucked out a maple nut cream. He took a bite and chewed it slowly, closing his eyes for a moment. He swirled the sweetness around on his tongue and across his lips, and for a moment he thought he caught Doreen's scent, and could almost hear her infectious laughter echoing in his past. He swallowed slowly, then opened his eyes. He looked into the photo and smiled. The candy was good, but like everything else in his life, somehow not quite the same without her. He nodded off to sleep and woke 20 minutes later feeling refreshed. In the garage, he gathered his fishing gear for the morning, a task so routine he could practically do it in his sleep. He pulled the ice auger from its spot against the wall, inspecting the worn blades. He added a bucket, a folding chair, a few rods, and his tackle box, not bothering to check its contents. As he worked, he imagined sitting there with Mike the next morning at Sweetbriar Lake on the ice. He'd have to watch himself. He couldn't seem too curious about the Schatz murder. Mike was only a few months from retirement, probably not working the case at all. If he was on the case, he probably wouldn't have time to go fishing. But assigned or not, this was likely the highest profile murder Bismarck had ever seen, so Mike would have heard plenty around the office. Doug still didn't think Mandy's name or address was on anyone's radar, but he couldn't be sure. It depended on how many people saw that envelope with the sloppy address written in the corner. Maybe it died with Alex, maybe not. He couldn't know for sure. Maybe the cops had talked to some junkie or suspect or person of interest who somehow had known something. Doug's stomach tightened. His bond with Mike was strong, but Mike was loyal to the badge, too. Later in the evening, Doug was back in the recliner, sipping whiskey and half watching a game when the phone rang. It was Mandy. "Turn on Channel 13, quick. I'll call you back in a bit. Channel 13 right now." She hung up. Doug dropped the phone, grabbed the remote, and flipped to Channel 13. Across the bottom of the screen, the words, "Biz City Breaking News Live." Linda, the reporter from Lyons Park, stood bundled in a heavy parka and knit hat, her breath visible in the cold night. Behind her were the lights outside of Bismarck Police Department. Again, if you're just joining us, Bismarck Police have just announced a major development in the ongoing investigation into the murder of newspaper carrier Alex Schatz. A short time ago, authorities confirmed that 3 individuals they now believe to be tied to Schatz's death were involved in a violent shootout near Stapleton, Nebraska. 2 suspects are confirmed dead at the scene. The third is in critical condition and being transported to a nearby hospital. A Nebraska state trooper also suffered minor injuries and is being treated. Bismarck PD expect to release names within the coming hours and state that all 3 are known to law enforcement in North Dakota. Police emphasize that while they believe there is no longer any immediate threat to the public, they urge residents to stay vigilant. We'll continue to follow this story here on Biz City Channel 13. Doug felt a heavy weight lift from his chest. His body slackened as he sank deeper into the recliner. He imagined a battered Ford Taurus abandoned on the shoulder of a Nebraska highway, its windshield and doors riddled with bullet holes. He smiled slightly, raised his glass, then took a sip. The phone rang again. Mandy's voice was alive with energy. "What do you think?" Doug told her what he thought, most of it anyway. He hoped, really hoped, that those three were the only ones involved. But he left one thought unsaid, something he could barely admit to himself. If that third guy had anything to do with it, if he was a part of the chain that led from Alex to the money, possibly to Mandy, a part of him hoped the guy wouldn't make it to the hospital alive. If he died tonight, Doug thought, it would be one less problem, one less risk for Mandy. Chapter 20. At 8 a.m. sharp, Doug parked his truck next to Mike's SUV at Sweetbriar Lake. Snow crunched under his boots as he stepped out. A few early risers were already hunched over their holes, steam curling from their portable heaters, shoulders hunched against the cold. Doug grabbed his gear and made his way over, spotting Mike mid-turn with a manual auger, shoulders working steady circles. "Got a head start, huh?" Doug called out, his breath clouding in the air. Mike looked up and grinned. "Figured I'd save your back." Doug dropped his gear and set up his folding chair. "Well, it's a perfect day for it." They fell into their usual rhythm, baiting hooks, checking lines. That was how it always was between them, a bit of talk followed by comfortable silences. Doug dropped his line into the freshly drilled hole. The red and white bobber floated gently on the dark water. The cold bit at his fingers, but the rhythm of fishing steadied him, gave him space to think. Doug had worried about how to bring up Alex Schatz's murder to Mike. He didn't want to come across as prying or too eager. But the news of the shootout in Nebraska changed all that. Now he didn't even need to finesse it at all. All of Bismarck was buzzing about it. The city could finally go back to normal. The maniacs who killed Alex Schatz supposedly no longer a threat. Doug thought it might even be weird to not talk about it today with Mike. "Thought they'd have you working that mess in Lyons Park," Doug said, eyes on the water. Mike adjusted his line. "Nah, I did a couple background checks early on, but that's about it. You catch the news this morning?" "Yeah, last night," Doug said. "A shootout, huh? 2 dead, I guess?" Mike shook his head. 3 dead now. The third perp died this morning at the hospital." Doug blinked. "Oh, really? No, I hadn't heard that part." He didn't know what he should feel, but a sense of relief hit him. "So tell me," Doug said, while reaching for his thermos, "was it some kind of drug deal gone wrong?" "Hard to say for sure, but that's the theory. Apparently all 3 of those guys dealt drugs one way or another." Mike held out his cup for some coffee. "Alex Schatz wasn't a dealer apparently, but he used it. Something must have gone sideways. Someone stole the drugs or the money or both. Whatever it was, it didn't end well for Alex Schatz. But the mutilation, that part makes no sense unless they were sending a message to somebody." "Monsters," Doug grunted. "That seems like an appropriate title for them," Mike said, tugging on his line. "Wish they could have brought him in alive, though. Now we'll never know exactly what happened." Doug nodded slowly. "Well, hopefully Bismarck can get back to normal." He tried to sound casual, but his mind was racing. The conversation drifted. Mike talked about his grandkids and his looming retirement. When Mike asked about Mandy, Doug kept it surface level. "She's doing okay. Still misses her mom, but she's hanging in there." "Did she find a job yet?" Doug saw his chance to steer the conversation to Handshake Row. "No, she hasn't," he said, shaking his head. "Such a blow for her to lose that job. Damn shame, to be honest. And I still don't understand exactly what happened to Johnny's Liquors. You mentioned something last time about funny business. Is that still being looked into? Mike raised his eyebrows. Well, we hit some dead ends, but between you and me, something never sat right there. Doug nodded. Can you explain it to me? Mandy tried to, but I'm not sure I really get it. Yeah, the whole thing's a bit elaborate, Mike said, but honestly, a lot of crimes are. Chapter 21. Oh boy. Doug shot a look at Mike. He was sitting up straight, the bobber suddenly under the water. Mike tugged at the line and the bobber surfaced again and stayed there. Dang, that felt like it would have been a good fight, Mike said. I bet the bugger stole my bait. He started reeling in his line. But yeah, anyway, see, when Johnny opened his store, Sean Williams lost his mind. You know, he owns Brandy's and those stores down south, too. And to be fair, Williams had a point. Johnny's store was on county land, just across the line. That meant his liquor license cost him peanuts compared to what Williams has to pay in Bismarck. And then there was the kicker, Sunday sales banned in Bismarck, legal in the county. So Johnny's was the only place open for Sundays for booze. Williams made a big stink about it. Doug remembered Mandy griping about working on Sundays. So Williams bought himself that rundown commercial building a few blocks away from Johnny's, the old vacuum cleaner place, also on county land. He got himself a county license and then started selling on Sunday too. Doug frowned. That's legal though, right? Yeah, that's totally legit, Mike said, rebaiting his hook. But then it gets weird. Out of the blue, the city annexes Johnny's property. Just his, not Williams. Now Johnny's place is in the city limits and his license is void. So Johnny buys a new city license from a shop up north, spends a fortune, but of course he loses Sunday sales. Anyway, he's just getting back on his feet and bam, city rezones again. This time his lot is now residential. Johnny can't even operate at all anymore. They basically pulled the rug right out from underneath them. I mean blatantly. Doug remembered the articles in the Herald. Johnny standing outside of Johnny's Liquors, arms crossed in defiance. A headline about his store being forced out of business, something like that. Mike tossed his line in the water again, then pulled a sandwich from his lunchbox. So of course Johnny sued the city, as anyone would. I sure as hell would've. And everyone figured he had it in the bag. It seemed so straightforward. But the judge tossed it out. Case dismissed. Like, what the hell? Nobody saw that coming. That's when the AG started thinking, maybe something else is going on. Doug let the silence settle. His thoughts churned. So, Doug said, you're saying the judge is corrupt? In on it somehow? Mike looked at Doug. Well, officially I'm not saying anything. Doug knew what he meant. This stays between us, between two old friends. I'm retiring soon, Mike said, so I'll leave it up to the others to pursue. What I can tell you, though, is that in Bismarck it's not a level playing field. Doug let the conversation settle. He didn't ask more questions. In some ways, he knew more than BCI did. He knew an envelope with $50,000 in cash was supposed to be dropped off at the judge's place. There was no way in the world that was some kind of legal transaction. It had dirt and crime written all over it. Doug changed the subject. They fished and talked and fished some more, and sometimes they didn't say much of anything. Just like they always had done for years at Sweetbriar Lake. Doug felt the sun warm his face, and a surprising smile tugged at his lips. He was alive, more alive than he'd been in a long time, and oddly proud of his new plan. He imagined Doreen teasing him, telling him he'd finally shaken off that gullible shell and stepped into the real world, where morals weren't black and white, but shifting shades of gray, impossible to pin down. Suddenly, he couldn't wait to talk to Mandy, to tell her that he thought she should keep the money. She could finally get on her feet, could open the floral shop. In some ways, this whole thing was some type of miracle. When Doug spoke next, he marveled at his own words, as if he was observing himself as another man, a stranger to himself. Well, Mandy's been thinking about opening that flower shop after all. She'd really like to make it happen. Well, that would be great for her, Mike said, wouldn't it? Sure would, Doug answered, smiling to himself. It's quite an investment, but I've decided I'm going to help her out. Great. How much is that going to set you back? Oh, about 50 grand, Doug said. Was it just Doug's imagination, or did Mike's eyebrow jump a little? Wow, didn't know you had that kind of cash lying around, Rolfstad. Doug felt perspiration attempting to collect on his forehead. I don't, but I've come up with a solution. I'm going to finally sell the boat. That should cover it, assuming I get a good price. Chapter 22. On the drive home, everything felt sharper. Colors were richer, the light warmer and brighter. The world was somehow humming with possibility. He couldn't wait to get home and call Mandy to tell her what he'd learned from Mike. The third perp was dead. Cops had no real leads. Most of all, he wanted to tell her to keep the damn money. Doreen had been right all along. He had been gullible and naive all these years, and he was tired of shooting himself and his family in the foot. Screw all those assholes along Handshake Row. This would be one time they didn't get to win. Depot Dreams Floral wasn't just going to remain a dream for Mandy. He was going to help her make it happen. Sure, her friends would ask her where she got the money to open the place, and Mandy would say, my dad helped me out. He sold his boat. And he would sell the boat, but mostly just to keep the story neat and tidy so that keen-thinking observers like Mike Berger would have no reason to suspect anything, and nobody needed to know where the real money came from. As soon as he got home, he tried calling Mandy, but no one answered. He unloaded his fishing gear and cleaned his fish. He tried calling Mandy again. No answer. He showered, changed clothes, and made himself a drink. He called again. Nothing. As the late afternoon ticked along, Doug began to lose his nerve. Was he maybe moving too fast? He found himself standing by the mantel, drink in one hand, a framed school portrait of Mandy in the other, her sophomore year in high school. What if he couldn't get a hold of her before 4 p.m.? She had made him promise to not go off script, and here he was about to drop this 180-degree turn on her. Screw the lawyer, keep the money. Looking down into Mandy's young eyes, it hit him somehow. Wasn't this, in fact, where he had faltered most as her father? Going off script, not following through on his promises and their agreements? And damn it, here he was about to do it all over again. The same old pattern repeating itself. He had always meant well, always thought he was doing the right thing, but how many times did he forget to ask her, to ask Mandy what she wanted, what she thought the right thing was? In the kitchen, next to the stack of unpaid cancer bills, Doug picked up the note with the address to Peterson and Green. 4 p.m. He glanced at the clock on the oven. It was 3:07. He nodded to himself, fully aware of what he had to do. He had promised her he would follow through with their plan, and their plan was for Doug to go to the lawyer at 4 p.m. with the money and then call her from there. He grabbed the keys to Mandy's place, then retrieved the money from the boat. He would check in with Cowboy the Cat and tried calling Mandy from her place. It was on the way. He took the pistol with him. Sure, those 3 suspects were in a Nebraska morgue somewhere, but were the cops really certain there weren't others out there? On the other hand, he didn't bother putting on his plumber's clothing this time. It all seemed unnecessary. Instead, he just quickly slipped the envelope into the front of his waistband, secured it under his belt, and pulled his sweatshirt over it. 15 minutes later, he pulled into Mandy's driveway and parked. Well, dear listeners, it seems our plumber-turned-secret agent has swapped wrenches for wisdom, and this time he's firmly resolved to follow the script. But with a loaded envelope in his waistband and a promise to keep, the only question is, will he stick to the plan, Or will temptation spring a leak? Tune in next week to see if Mr. Rolfstad can patch together his promises before they burst at the seams. Friday Night Fiction is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. This story is created and owned by James Wolner 2025, all rights reserved. No part of the story may be reproduced, distributed, or adapted in any form without explicit written permission. Unauthorized use of this material is strictly prohibited and protected under applicable copyright laws. Check out more at dakotaspotlight.com.